This vast red land, far from mainland America, is actually part of Alaska. It lies about 500 kilometers away from the US mainland and has a very sparse population. However, since 1906, this region has yielded over 15,000 kilograms of gold every year. Additionally, the US extracts more than 1 million barrels of oil and trillion cubic feet of natural gas from here annually. But here's something surprising. This land wasn't always a part of the United States. Once upon a time, it belonged to Russia. In 1867, Russia willingly sold this entire region to America. Can you guess the price? Was it $1 billion? Million? Believe it or not, the US bought Alaska for just million at a mere cents per acre. But why would a powerful nation like Russia sell such a valuable land so cheaply, especially when it was at the peak of its expansion? Could Russia have become a wealthier nation if it had kept Alaska? Was there a hidden reason behind the sale, or perhaps even a curse? In today's video, we're going to uncover the fascinating story behind this historic deal. Our story begins in the 18th century when Peter the Great ruled the Russian Empire. His ultimate goal was to expand Russia so far and wide that its influence would reach every corner of the world. Even after his death in 1725, the rulers who followed him continued this vision. It was during the reign of Empress Anna of Russia that Russian expansion crossed the seas. In 1732, Russian explorers ventured beyond the ocean and arrived at a vast ice-covered land. It was so enormous that they called it the Great Land. In Russian, this name transformed into Alaska, and as it spread, differences in pronunciation eventually made Alaska the official name. When the Russians first set foot in Alaska, they didn't find gold or silver, but they did discover an incredible treasure: fur-bearing animals. At that time, Alaska was home to thousands of sea otters, beavers, minks, martens, foxes, lynxes, and even wolverines. Because these animals thrived in the cold, their thick fur was highly valuable worldwide. The demand for fur coats, shawls, sweaters, and jackets was so high that the income from selling them could sustain an entire country. The news of this discovery quickly reached Russia. Then, in 1741, a Danish explorer named Vitus Bering, who worked for Russia, accidentally landed on Alaska's coast while returning from another voyage. Bering and his crew thoroughly explored southern Alaska, gathering crucial information about the land and its resources. Unfortunately, Bering himself fell ill and died before reaching Russia, but his surviving crew successfully delivered the findings. As soon as this news spread, Russians saw a golden opportunity to build generational wealth. Since Alaska had a low population, there was less competition, and the cost of living was much lower compared to Russia. Realizing how profitable it could be, traders and craftsmen began migrating to Alaska, settling along its coasts. They hunted these fur-bearing animals relentlessly, which provided two key benefits. They could eat the meat for survival and sell the fur for huge profits. As the fur trade flourished, Russia established the Russian-American company RASI in 1799 to manage and expand the business. Before this, buyers and sellers had to negotiate deals individually, but with the creation of this company, all trade was centralized, making the business more efficient and profitable. At this time, Russia was expanding its control over Alaska without much opposition. There were no official claims from other nations challenging Russian authority, so no one questioned their growing presence. Soon, around 700 Russians had settled in Alaska, and what had started as a fur trade operation evolved into a political matter. In 1821, Tsar Alexander I took a bold step by issuing an imperial edict declaring that the North American Pacific coast was now officially Russian territory. This meant that all of Alaska was under Russian rule. However, while this move was powerful, its timing couldn't have been worse, drawing attention from other nations, especially the United States. Why was America angry? When Russia first settled in Alaska in 1732, both Canada and America were still British colonies. But by July 4th, 1776, the United States had gained independence from Great Britain and was now an independent nation, controlling its own taxation, trade, and economy. The issue wasn't that Russia had claimed a large, icy, and seemingly unimportant landmass. Most people didn't care much about Alaska at the time. The real problem was a specific rule within Russia's edict. Foreign ships, including American ones, were banned from coming within 100 nautical miles, about 185 kilometers of Alaska's coast. For the newly independent United States, this was a major problem. Trade was essential for their economic growth, and if they couldn't access key sea routes near Alaska, their economy would suffer. No trade meant no money, and no money meant their dreams of expansion and development would remain just that, dreams. Naturally, America objected to Russia's new policy. Russia had two choices. Now, Russia was at a crossroads. It could either 1. Ignore America's complaints and risk making a powerful new enemy while already having plenty of conflicts elsewhere, or 2. Compromise with America and maintain good diplomatic relations. Russia, being a strategic nation, chose diplomacy over conflict. It invited the United States for discussions, leading to the Russo-American Treaty of 1824. What did the treaty say? As part of the treaty, Russia agreed to two key terms. Russia would limit its Alaskan territorial claims to 54°40 north latitude and not expand beyond this boundary. American ships would be allowed access to Russian ports for trade, ensuring smooth economic relations. Since these conditions didn't significantly harm Russia's interests, they easily agreed. This treaty marked a crucial moment in U.S.-Russia relations and played a key role in shaping the future of Alaska's ownership. For a few years, everything seemed to be going well in Russian-controlled Alaska. However, as time passed, the population of settlers continued to grow. By the 1840s, the Russian population in Alaska had increased to around 10,500, all of whom lived under the control of the Russian-American Company. Initially, when only 700 hunters were active, the animal population could sustain itself. But now, with thousands of people relying on fur trade, overhunting became a serious problem. Animals don't reproduce infinitely, and with the rising demand for fur, their numbers plummeted rapidly. By the 1850s, the once thriving population of fur-bearing animals, estimated over 300,000 in the early 1700s, was nearly wiped out. Fur became so scarce that even experienced hunters struggled to find enough animals to sustain the trade. The decline of Alaska's economic value. Alaska's fur trade was the only real economic benefit Russia had from the colony. But as animal numbers declined, the revenue from fur sales dropped sharply every year. Soon, it became difficult for Russia to sustain Alaska financially, as the colony could no longer support itself. But Russia's problems didn't end there. Another major crisis was looming: Russia's growing political struggles. By the mid-19th century, Russia had very few allies and many enemies. At the time, more than countries, including India, Pakistan, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, were under British rule, making Britain one of Russia's biggest rivals. At the same time, Russia didn't get along with France either. Russia had been aggressively expanding its territory for years, and this worried many European nations. They were desperate to stop Russia's expansion, but they needed the right opportunity. That opportunity arrived when the Ottoman Empire began to weaken. Seeing this as a chance to gain power, Russia attacked the Ottomans on July 2, 1853, and occupied what is now Romania. However, Russia's timing was terrible. By this period, the Ottomans had entrusted the guardianship of their religious sites to France. This meant that Russia's attack was seen as a direct challenge to France, escalating tensions between the two nations. The Crimean War and Russia's global humiliation. This conflict triggered the Crimean War, in which Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire joined forces against Russia. The war was brutal, and despite its military strength, Russia suffered heavy losses. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris on March 30, 1856, in which Russia was forced to accept defeat. However, the economic damage Russia suffered was immeasurable, and the loss of global respect was even worse. At this point, Russia was financially drained, politically isolated, and struggling to maintain its vast empire. With Alaska no longer profitable and the nation facing economic turmoil, the idea of selling Alaska started to seem like a necessary option. By 1860, Alaska's fur trade was no longer as profitable as before. In fact, many times it was running at a loss, draining money from Russia's already struggling economy. The venture, which once provided wealth, had now become a financial burden. At the same time, Canada was under British control, and Britain, with its vast colonial empire, rarely faced economic crises. Russia feared that the British Empire in Canada might attempt to seize Alaska, especially given Russia's weak financial condition and its recent defeat in the Crimean War, 1853-1856. Russia knew very well that if Britain attacked, they wouldn't be able to defend Alaska, and losing another war to the same adversary would be a huge humiliation. The idea of selling Alaska. So, what was the solution? Russia needed to give up Alaska, but simply abandoning it wasn't an option. If Russia left Alaska unprotected, Britain could take over, making Russia's humiliation even worse. Instead, a middle path was found. Why not sell Alaska to America, Russia's relatively new friend? This would bring two major benefits for Russia. One, it would receive much-needed money in an economic crisis. Two, it would strengthen diplomatic ties with the U.S. failed attempts to sell Alaska. With high hopes, Russia proposed the deal to the American government between 1859 and 1860. However, nothing happened because America was facing increasing internal tensions, with the threat of civil war looming. Still, Russia persisted, and in 1860, a meeting was held between officials of both nations. During the discussion, Russian officials asked America how much they were willing to pay. The American response? At most, $5 million, a price far lower than what Russia expected. The negotiations stalled after this. as America's focus shifted to the Civil War 1861-1865. The deal finally happens. By 1866, with the Civil War over, the U.S. government became interested again in acquiring Alaska. The American leadership thought that such a major land acquisition would shift public attention away from domestic issues, making governance easier. As a result, both parties met again in March 1867. After a full night of negotiations on March 30th, 1867 at 4 a.m., America signed the Alaska Purchase Treaty and Russia sold Alaska to the U.S. for $7.20 million, which is equivalent to approximately $129 million today. Now, let's put this into perspective. Russia sold Alaska for just 2 cents per acre, which is only 36 cents in today's value. America's initial reaction and Alaska's hidden wealth. After the purchase, many Americans mocked the deal. Critics called it a waste of taxpayer money and sarcastically referred to Alaska as a polar bear garden. At the time, Alaska seemed like a barren wasteland with little to no known resources. However, America's luck changed just a few years later. In 1877, gold was discovered, leading to a major gold rush. In 1902, oil was found, adding even more value to the land. By 1967, natural gas production began, further increasing Alaska's importance. The very land that America once thought was useless turned out to be one of the richest resource hubs in the world. Today, Alaska stands as a major pillar of the American economy, producing vast amounts of oil, gas, and mineral.